All right, this is a fun one. This particular project is something I've been meaning to do 5, 6 years. It's been on my list. Yes, it is a box, but there's so much more inside, a lot more to this project, a lot more to this video. Yes, it is a box, and the majority of this video is a tutorial on how to make a splined box, lid, spline jig, traditional woodworking tools. And then, yes, there is some more hidden inside, more pieces, projects, it's a game, inside, lots of other good stuff. Also, some extra things are coming here. So stay tuned, a little bit of a story as well as the tutorial. Use the timestamps if you just want the build, but some story time, intermixed as well. Fun one, box build, and so much more. Check it out. So to start off, you got to mill up some wood. So I got a quick tip here. Throughout the video, there's going to be lots of different tips, but sometimes you might get wood that is a little twisted or bowed. So obviously, if you had a big joiner like this, you could join it and you could then plane it, get it all dead flat. And that is a great option. You obviously need to do that for most woodworking applications. However, most folks don't have these tools, or at least the wide enough tools. So here's a quick little hack that I've done in the past. You just take a sled. So melamine is a great product for this, right? It's gonna be pretty flat. And then just add a little stop at the end, and then you shim it up. You can use some hot melt, some hot glue, some CA glue, and then you get it so it doesn't rock. You can even add in these little 2x4 scrap wood pieces. So the snipe from the planer digs into that. And then the planer acts as a jointer. So if you have some stock that's just really twisted, cupped, or bowed, you flatten one side, got a nice, clean, smooth surface. Then you go back to the sled, flip it over, little chalk just to see how much it's removing, and now you have coplanar. You have some dead flat stock. You're good to go for your project. So here is another application of it. I've done this a lot with cutting boards. I have a lot of cutting board content. One in particular, Cutting Board 101. Lots of tips in this one. I did make a more recent version with Cutting Board 101 and 102 that talks a lot more about that sled if you're a little bit curious. All right, back to this build. So here I'm making this side. So got some nice curly maple, some wenge, lots of choice woods that you could go for this. Got my pieces, they're nice and flat, they're all milled up, and now I'm cutting the strips. So I went with a decorative top. I'll talk about some other choices and options later in the video, but I'm just getting everything kind of set for the top, the thickness of the top lid. Here is the base of the box itself. Went with some cherry. I'll talk about why I picked cherry later. It's just a great warm color. But go ahead, cutting that. Obviously, it's a box, it's a rectangle, whatever shape you want, so get those all the same dimensions. And here you can see it, just get an idea of the thickness, but obviously you're gonna cut it to size eventually. All right, so for those side pieces, I wanted to have this cool effect. So here I am at the bandsaw. You could certainly do this at the table saw. A bandsaw is just gonna remove less material. And so I went with thin strips with that wenge and curly maple in the middle. It's a great combo. I use it a lot for my different projects, but I'm just cutting everything nice and thin. There's other ways to do this again, and then once you've done that, you do want to make sure everything is perfectly flat. So planer here makes a big difference. You can do this whole project without a planer. It's just here, so we're using it. All right, glue ups. So first up, had to go ahead and do a bigger panel using these panel clamps. These are great DIY units. I actually have a whole video on these, but really affordable option to get 4-way pressure, get things dead flat, really help with some applications like this. But then for the tops, just went ahead and used quick clamps. And so here I'm doing them all in one go. However, I didn't, have in between. So I had like 3 and 3 and 3. Just be aware of the orientation so you're not gluing them all together in one block, but I had my 4 strips all together. All right, now I'm gonna resaw that big panel I made. So this is for the top and the bottom. I find going to the table saw first is actually best. It helps me. I get a little bit too much drift at the bandsaw. So here I've kind of lined it up right dead middle where I'm going. And so this is giving me a curve, kind of a guide that I'm gonna use at the bandsaw. Now, if you don't have a bandsaw, you could just do this approach and then follow up with like a pole saw or a thin saw. But here, I'm using that as a guide at the bandsaw. It just works a little bit better for me. And you see there is some of that material a little bit higher, but honestly, I've done it other ways and I just get the best results this way. Then you can go ahead and flatten it. You could flatten it at a planer. You could just use a hand plane or a belt sander if you didn't have a planer, but obviously a planer or a thicknesser, it's going to work great. So now you have two flat pieces, right? These are going to be inset in the top and the bottom. The thickness here, I wouldn't go much thinner than 1/4 inch. It doesn't need to be super thick. It depends on what you're using the box for. For this application, I didn't want it too heavy. So this look, that top is going to have that wenge, that darker wood and the cherry. But you can see here, I kind of messed up on some measurements. So my thickness is off. And so I could just set the lid on the top, but I didn't really like that look, so I decided to go ahead and remove the material, and instead of chancing it at the bandsaw for resawing, I wasted wood. I apologize. And so I'm just thicknessing, planing this down to have the same thickness for the two pieces. All right, now comes some grooves. We're cutting some grooves. So I'm taking these pieces, and after I clean up the sides, right, making sure that they're all the same, thickness for the height. Now I'm measuring really carefully the height. So that blade is sticking up about 1/4 inch, and so I'm cutting a groove that's the thickness of the kerf of the blade, so about an 1/8 inch kerf, and so it's cutting a 1/8 inch groove that top is going to be. See, you can see right there, there's that groove on those cherry pieces. So I'm cutting that equal distance apart. So make sure you keep the fence where it's at, and that way you have that groove consistent for all of them. And then I'm taking those panels that I resawed, they're all resawn, however you say that, and then we're just going to cut them to size. So I ended up going back and forth on the final dimensions. I didn't want this box to be too long, too bulky, and so these were my final dimensions, and it works great. Okay, so now it's time to cut a 45-degree miter. So for my corners, I went with miter joints. So just using just a piece of scrap wood on a miter gauge, you could do a sled, lots of ways to do this. But my blade is at 45 degrees, and just a lot of measuring. You're cutting a rectangle. So mine's not a perfect square. So I have, obviously, my width is going to be the same size, and my length is the same side. So you can kind of gang cut them like this, right next to each other, so you get the same, but go really slow. Lots of measurements. It's not always a bad idea to have an extra on hand in case you mess up here, but definitely take your time here. Get your grooves, and you also want to make sure you have a good clean cut so that the joints will do just fine. All right, once you've done that, do some dry fits. Just test everything out. That groove is there. You got your miter joints. Make sure everything fits how you want it to fit. And when it looks good, time for glue. Now, I do find that painter's tape works the best. Here, just gets everything aligned. And then you're going to add your glue to your joints. Make sure you don't add it to the groove. Wood moves, right? It expands and contracts. And so seasonal humidity changes. If you glued in that bottom or the top, it's going to split over time. So you want it to be a floating lid, a floating portion there. And so just using the tape, I'm using the tape as clamps, pretty tight. Now I might need to add like a right angle clamp like this. If I was having some issues, you could use those miter clamp, little spring clamps. If you want to get a little bit more pressure, just a little quick clamp where you need it. Take a look, get everything where you want it. So here, rinse and repeat. I'm doing the same thing with the lid. Now, I've done this before where you just make one box and then you actually cut the lid apart. I have a whole other video I'll reference a couple more times in this video. But for this project, I wanted a different color lid. I just wanted to have that little accent piece. So it's actually an even easier way of doing this that I'll reference later. But here, I got my top, I got my bottom. They are the same dimensions, and got a pretty good joint. So this piece right here, you have to take a little extra time to make sure it's perfect. The angle will tell you. Now these miter joints are not strong enough on their own, so you need splines. So this is a spline jig, and it's cutting a little angle piece along that miter joint where I can add more pieces of wood that will add structure and support, so it will prevent splitting over time. Here on the base, I'm adding 2 splines. You probably could have gone even 3. These are not just decorative. They look really cool, but they're actually adding structural support. So how this jig works, I made this in that original video that I'll keep referencing if you want a slower how I made it. But it's really simple. Just some scrap plywood, pocket holes, got 45-degree angles, And then your piece, whatever it is, this is great for picture frames. It's going to set in right there at that 45, and then you have the blade just raised enough to remove however much material you want. Now, I was lazy and I did not switch out to a flat bottom blade on the table saw blade here, so I have a little cleanup to do. But then you see there's those little openings for the splines. You can see it a lot better here on the lid. It's a little bit more, you know, that's just the kerf of the saw blade. That's 1/8 of an inch. The ones on the base of the cherry box, that required some more passes. You could certainly switch over to a dado stack. Okay, this is the one I keep referencing. This is that video. You can search my channel. Talks about how to do that in one pass, how to make the jig and all that. But here I had to do a little bit of cleanup with some chisels, because I didn't switch over to a flat bottom blade, or again, like I mentioned, you could use a dado stack if you have a specific width that you're looking for. But got it, and now you're adding in your wood. So here I got some curly maple, keeping it consistent. That's going in along that wenge. You know, just a little bit of glue or a lot of glue. You might have some little holes. You might need to do some patchwork later. A great tip woodworkers use is you just use some sawdust from the matching wood and some wood glue. You could use some CA glue to patch any rough spots. Here I have like leftover pieces from the lid that I use for splines on the side. I think it looks really, really cool. And you can see how I mentioned maybe I could have done a third one in the middle there, but I was happy with this. And structurally supported, and it looks good. All right, flush trim saw. This saw I've had for like, I don't know, 6 years. It is so clutch. Haven't ever needed to resharpen it or get a new one. This is so great, especially if you don't have that bandsaw for resawing pieces. Highly recommend. But in this application, it really shines. So just go ahead, flush trim, cut off the edges. To do some sanding after the fact. But once you do this, you might reveal some little holes or some spots that you have to fill with that sawdust or CA glue. You can see my CA glue is out. I had some to patch. You could use a drum sander to sand everything flat here, or like I've done in the past, you could just have sheets of sandpaper like on a granite slab or something and move it back and forth. I referenced that in the other video. Or you can just use a sander. This is a great sander. I'll talk about this in a little bit. It's really nice because it's that rectangle, so I can sand in all these corners, so I wasn't as worried about glue squeeze out here, and it can get in the tray and the lid. So I'll talk about my sanding progressions in a second, but I do at this point like to sand everything to 80 grit, get everything right where I want it. So once I've sanded everything to 80 grit and everything's looking good, no patchwork, I go ahead and mark out where I want my hinges to go. Now these hinges are perfect. They're about 1/4 inch thick, so I can use a trim router with an upcut spiral bit. I find it a lot easier than doing chisel work, and just a steady hand. So here I'm doing some test fits just to test it out. If you haven't done this before, don't be daunted. Really just steady and slow like this. You know, it looks a little precarious here, so do some practice first. I find just my best results this way. And so just nice and steady, following that line, just dead center, work my way. I've marked it out. I know where it's at. This is a pretty thin, lid, thin walled box. So maybe you want to go a little bit thicker if you're a little, a little daunted by this, but it's not as hard as it looks. So definitely just practice that out. It's a fun little skill to have. So I've removed it, little X-Acto knife to get everything clean. These are what those hinges look like, pretty simple. I'll link these and everything else down below. Lots of hinge options. I've used these in a couple projects. But there they are. Now I'm gonna do the same idea. I'm gonna mark it on the lid and, again, rinse and repeat. So just take your time to mark it, maybe even get like a mini square to get everything centered. And then again, I do find the trim router just works best. If you don't want to do the trim router, you're going to have to do chisel work, but I just think it's going to be a little bit rougher, not as clean. And so even with these thin walls where they're probably, they're probably like 3/8 of an inch. Maybe, no, they're a little under 1/2 inch for the walls. So I have a little bit of play, not as much. So maybe, for your box, want to go a little bit thicker. All right, laser engraving the lid. This is an heirloom box, so we are going to laser engrave it with a special engraving. I'll talk more about this at the end of the video and what's inside. Lots of fun stuff here, but I do want to talk about laser engraving. So I'm a woodworker who has just become obsessed with lasers recently, and if you're on the fence about lasers, I get it. I knew nothing about lasers. but there is a lot of woodworking applications. So obviously branding your work here is one of the mini lasers I use. Just putting my brand, it's just a lot easier than getting a brand. You can use a different laser like this to do the sides. There are so many applications of lasers for woodworking projects. And, you know, most woodworkers, we like to make projects for friends and family. Some of us do this as a side hustle, or you even do it as a small business. And so laser engravers, there's a lot of them out there. This is, you know, just some of the branding that I've done. There's a lot of other applications of lasers, and I do find it is crazy intuitive. I have started making a lot more videos, actually got well over 30 videos just on lasers and just how easy it is. If you want to see some other project ideas, here are just some of my laser projects in a playlist just from this last year and a half. And so here you can see all kinds of possibilities, you know, obviously signs. You can engrave anything. You can engrave so much, you know, coasters, pre-made things. You can even do screen printing, all right, making chess sets, layered laser art, embossing wood, deep embossing, all kinds of applications, other materials as well. But recently I've actually been doing a lot of hardwood projects. And so got a video kind of talks about the different lasers. If you're curious, you can check that out. We'll talk a little bit more later. Okay, sanding. So I start with 80 grit and I'm really working it over. I don't want to round over my corners. Quick tip right here. Quick tip, it's gonna feel like an ad, I promise it's not. It's just really, really helpful. So this is the Surf Prep sander. See me use it. It's awesome. What's really amazing, like obviously I like the 3x4, the size is a great sander on its own. What I really love is their sanding foam, right? So the foam adhesive, not adhesive, foam abrasives, right? So we have thin, medium, we have the really thick stuff. This is incredible, so when I'm sanding, I'm not gonna round over the corners. I have all these features. This, I've used a ton in my cutting boards, sanding juice grooves, no hand sanding. This really, this unit and these sanding foam has really eliminated all of my hand sanding, which I hate. Now, if you don't wanna get the new one, get a new sander, they do make attachments for like 5-inch, 6-inch, you know, the foam. So you can just take your sander, and take whatever sander, throw it on. You get the idea, right? You get this, and then you got the foam, and then you can sand over, and you're not gonna round over the corners if you're looking for a sharp look. It's so nice. And there's all the different grits, all the possibilities. And so for me, personally, I usually start just with standard, a little protector plate here. I do 80, I do 120, and then I like kind of 150. Then I do, sorry if you want to get the whole feel, the medium, this thinner one. And then I work my way out to fine. I just get way better results. The finish is spectacular. This, like really, it's a game changer. As to this unit, I do have a full dust collector and I've tried lots of things. I have no dust, like hardly any. It sucks it up so well with this unit here. It's amazing. It really, I hate when people say it's a game changer, but it really has been a game changer for me. I can run it. Yes, I'm still wearing my mask, but I don't need it as much as I would, you know, with other units. So really, there's minimal sawdust and sanding. Anyway, awesome. This is really cool. So Surf Prep, check out the link down below, discount code. Yes, it's an affiliate link. It helps support the channel. However, this foam, the Pro Foam, there's nothing like it that I've tried. I've tried a ton of other abrasives. It's amazing. At the very least, check these out. All right, quick tip. Maybe not so quick, but you get the idea. So if you don't have a rectangular sander like this, you're gonna have to use blocks. One thing with that is those lines are gonna show up. So this really does help reducing those cross-grain lines. But I've got those same progressions that I talked about. Once I'm done with all my sanding, I do want to spray off any of the dust. You could use a tack cloth to remove that as well, but just using the air compressor here to remove any of that sandy dust. Lots of finish choices. I love Walrus Oil, the brand of Walrus Oil. They've got a lot of great products. This is their furniture butter. It's their paste wax finish. And so it's a hard wax, and I'm just applying everything just with one of those Scotch-Brite, you know, cloths. I can probably even just use a shop towel. And just a little bit goes a long way. putting it everywhere, and then after it's fully absorbed, I'm drying it off, I'm buffing it in, making sure there's none that sits on top. You could build up coats if you want to get a great finish, but I just love this finish. You can feel the wood. It's a wonderful finish. All right, so now I'm adding those hinges, screwing them in, making sure everything works just fine, but I already checked earlier, so of course it will. And there we have it. We got some hinges, we're attached, we're good to go. Little latch, I'm gonna add a little latch here, just to, you know, keep it locked together, just adds a little class here. So pretty simple, straightforward, you know, just line it up, center it, the end. Have a nice day. And there you have it. Super fun. Now, this is not done yet. There are actually quite a few tips I still have to give. I know the box is mostly done, but stick with me. Some really, really cool other applications with this box. But here, at this point, you can see how it turned out. Pretty fun. Pretty fun. Okay, I made some cool games. A game insert. And so now with the laser, I cut some game you know, piece holders, some different things. I can use the laser to make these little trays inside. Here's some game pieces, and these are all hardwood. So if you're here as a woodworker, this is all solid hardwood. Beautiful, you know, purple heart, canary wood, padauk, curly maple, wenge, walnut, all these different wooden pieces I cut on the laser. Adding all these little game pieces in here, it is Settlers of Catan, or Catan, however you pronounce it. And adding the trays, adding the troughs, adding all the pieces, and wouldn't you know it, I do have a video on how I made 14 unique sets. This was a personal project that I just had so much fun doing. I ended up making those 14 unique sets. I wanted to explore all the possibilities, but here is just one of those examples of how much fun lasers can be. This is one game. You could apply this to chessboards, to any game you want. Lots of possibilities. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this project or lasers, you can check out that video. And then specifically, if you want to see what you can do with hardwood, this video has some great tips on no hand sanding for all those pieces. So you might want to check that out. But to the box itself, super fun, super happy with how it all turned out. And inside we have the game. But wait, there's a little bit more on this project and some more woodworking that might be done. And we have it. We have the box. We've got the lock. My gosh, I am just so happy about this. So yes, this is Settlers of Catan. I've made 14 different sets of this, all kinds. I got other videos just on that process, so if you want more on that, you can check that out. But this is a personal project, right? This box was made for my cousin who's getting married, big board game enthusiast, and so we've got ourselves the wedding guest book. Yes, this was intended to be the wedding guest book. So this is before the wedding, but what's gonna happen is this is gonna be out at the wedding, and folks are gonna have a wood burning pen, and they are gonna sign their names on the wood. So that's why I selected cherry. You know, we can do the box, the side. If they wanna do the inside of the lid, there's some options. But this is just gonna be a really cool piece where it's like an heirloom piece. And your guest book, I mean, I don't even know where my guest book is for my wedding. Anyway, cool piece right here. So that's what it's gonna be. So stay tuned. After the fact, I'll throw some quick pics of what it looked like after the fact. Hopefully we'll get that in here. But fun project, super fun. And went ahead using the scrap wood, engraved a little message, got a little wood burning kit. And so guests could practice before doing the actual box. And here are some of the signatures on it. Just lots of fun. It was really cool. And so it's a piece that they have. They can play the game. They do play the game, have the signatures, and just super fun. All right, so the box build, I do have more videos on boxes on the Splines. Got a really old one. I can check this one out here, but also lots more. Obviously, the Catan is super fun. If you have a laser, this project you can do on any laser. Any laser would work. I'll talk about all the options. If you don't have a laser and you want to learn more, I got a lot of videos on that. So if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing to see more videos like this. We got some relatively traditional woodworking tools as well as lasers, all kinds of applications, lots of cool stuff. If you're interested in any of the links, any of the stuff I used, hardware, whatnot, links down below. lasers. If you want to learn about engraving and all that, check out this video. It really is a great introduction to lasers and just what the different ones do as well. And if you are interested in purchasing, yes, like we mentioned with the sander, yeah, we have an affiliate link for that. We do have an affiliate link for the lasers. You can use this QR code right here or the link down below. You do get savings, and a portion comes back and it supports our channel, helps us make videos like this, helps do things for my kids, all that good stuff. So anyway, fun project. Fun project. That's the cool thing about woodworking. I can make things super personal. So hopefully this added value, gave you some ideas, some tips and tricks, and thank you for watching. Until next time, take care.